Hey there! Welcome to another episode of Raw Green, a show produced by Obi, a sustainability consultancy specialized in life cycle assessment, research, and green techs. Learn more about us on oneobi.com or take a look at our pages on various social medias. Links are ready for you in the description. Ciao! I am Francesco De Lieto. I am passionate about sustainability and green technologies. Welcome to a new episode of Raw Green. What do flax, linseed oil, bamboo, soy, hemp, and algae have in common with the electric or hybrid propulsion? Absolutely nothing. If not for the fact that all of the above are key components for the boats of the future. The global leisure boat industry is valued at approximately 40 billion US and is projected to reach over 53 by 2030 at a compound annual growth rate of 4%. Of this, in 2024, the electric boat market is valued at 7 billion and expected to grow over 12%, triple the one of the overall industry. Why is that? To answer this and the following 349 questions I have here ready, today we have the pleasure of sitting down with David Kendall, the CEO of Optima Yachts, an innovative company based in the UK that designs and builds electric boats so beautiful that I can already see myself onto one of those with George Clooney and Amal on the Como Lake. David, welcome to Raw Green. How are you?
Hi, Francesco. Thank you. Yeah, I'm very well. And that was a very interesting introduction with some juicy numbers in there. I'm not sure about the 349 questions, but we'll see how many we get through.
Well, the average duration of a Raw Green episode, it is 5 days, so we have time.
That's fine then. Yeah.
All right, David, why don't we start from yourself? Okay, you are a aeronautical engineer. Tell me tell me your journey from aeronautical engineer to develop electric yachts. What pushed you? What was the trigger that makes you decide to go into this venture?
Yeah, I'll try not to use the whole first day of our 5-day chat, but I trained as an aeronautical engineer with British Aerospace in the UK, originally working on things like Tornado fighters and Airbus A320s. And that's where my roots still lie, even though that was a very long time ago. But it gives you a phenomenally good grounding in engineering and a certain mindset for perfection, optimization. And perfection is a bit of a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow that we probably never quite reach, but we're always striving for it. But it certainly puts in your roots this sort of striving for optimization. And it's actually a little bit how the name of the company came about in Optima, because we're always striving for the optimum solutions, whether that's a boat or something else. I've designed all sorts of things from buildings to bridges to wind turbine blades to boats. So I actually got out of aerospace industry quite a long time ago, but it gave me a phenomenal insight, particularly into what we could do with composite materials, with carbon fiber, which we were just beginning to introduce into civil aircraft. The A320 was one of the sort of first civil airliners to really make more use of carbon fiber composites, and I could always see huge opportunities for these materials in other industries. I always had a personal interest in marine and boats, from a very young age of sailing dinghies or paddling canoes. So all sorts of craft on the water. And after a while, I moved into consultancy, and we actually ended up building up our own consultancy practice where we mainly focused on the structural design of marine craft and other composite structures. And that ranged from everything from fast ferries to patrol boats to hovercraft to all sorts of
Nice.
quite quirky marine vessels. So quite a journey. Did a lot of work in things like wind turbine crew transfer vessels in the really early days where they didn't exist, but they wanted to build offshore wind farms and needed to move people out onto turbines in all weathers. Um, and I think our focus has always been about producing optimized solutions. Um, Also developed a huge interest in environmental issues.
Hmm.
Worked on quite a lot of renewable energy projects, both wind, wave, and tidal energy. So underwater tidal turbines built out carbon fiber, that sort of thing. And I think that also made me a lot more aware of the environmental challenges that we face, um, which is probably the biggest challenge to mankind and the world that we have going forwards, which some people are very aware of and some are
Some a little bit
maybe
less.
denying. Yeah,
Yeah, it is. Look, you were talking. You briefly mentioned materials, okay, and in the maritime industry, the overall use of materials, it is something that I noticed in the last few years. Started to investigate new materials, to try new materials, to develop new materials. Now, material science has grown a lot also outside what are the composites used into the marine environment. And you use flax, you use bamboo, you use cork, and you mentioned carbon fiber. Now, from a life cycle perspective, the production can be optimized one way or another, even on, let's say, classic material like epoxy resin. The problem it is the end of life management. And there is always associated with these new materials, they call it the green premium. However, in the boating industry in general, the power of purchase, it is a higher and less sensitive. For example, if you want to compare it with electric cars, okay. So why it is taking so long to have a quicker and more rapid adoption of sustainable materials?
I think the biggest problem is that there's a lot of resistance to change in the big established builders. They're very invested in what they're building, how they're building it, and what they're building it from. And they're sadly not that interested in change. So a lot of the change we see and a lot of the innovation is in smaller companies, startup companies, entrepreneurial companies. The big major builders are very conservative when it comes to things that are new, which is really sad because they're the ones who are using probably 90% of the materials and creating 90% of the carbon emissions in what they build. So we
Mm.
need to get them to change, but most of the groundwork will be done in smaller, more entrepreneurial companies. And it's interesting the sort of range of materials that you talked about, and we're using all of those in our boats. Um, Carbon fiber gets a lot of bad press in terms
Mm.
of its environmental credentials, primarily because there is a huge amount of energy that goes into producing carbon fiber.
But that's an investment
Processing
that you
it at
do. It's an
yeah,
investment because then you
extremely high
have
temperatures.
lighter weight, which should also lead to lower consumption during the use phase. Uh,
That's a really key point. And with things like carbon fiber, with a lot of embodied energy in it, you need to use it carefully. You need to use it wisely. It's also an expensive material, but there are applications and places on the boat where it pays for itself both commercially and environmentally. At the end of the day, boats are so sensitive to weight, and the environmental impact of using the boat is pretty much proportional to its weight. So if we can reduce the weight of the boat, whether that's in structure or fit out or machinery or wherever, we reduce the through life environmental impact and cost of running the boat. So there are certainly cases where making a boat almost entirely out of carbon fiber may make sense, both
Mm.
environmentally and commercially, particularly for boats that are used more. Um, Generally, leisure boats don't run up very many hours, but there are exceptions to that, particularly with boats that are owned in boat clubs and in or joint ownership that are out almost every single day. But also commercial vessels, particularly sort of ferries, water taxis that are operating all day, every day. Then there's a totally different balance between embodied energy in constructing the boat and energy emissions through using the boat.
Hmm.
So it's a complex analysis, but we need to look at all the pros and cons of different materials, and and unfortunately, a lot of the more environmentally friendly materials, the natural materials, their performance is a bit lower, so they will often add a bit of weight. So again, we need to use them carefully, use them where the impact on weight is not so extreme. In our boats, some we're using recycled foam cores made out of water bottles for things like bulkheads, um, but we wouldn't use those in the bottom of the hull, where
Mm.
the loading on the core is so much higher. So we pick all the right materials in the right place. I think we still have a long way to go with natural fibers. We're doing some research at the moment, using flax and fibers such as that, and we've been doing a little bit more on looking at using bamboo fibers. The potential to get better properties out of these fibers is still not entirely realized. We get a lot of fiber damage when they're processed. So I think the fiber processing and the translation from natural fibers into fabrics and reinforcements that we can use in a structure still has some way to go. So we will see improvements in natural fiber composites.
Okay. Well, look, that is a life cycle thinking approach during the R&D phase, if I can be a little bit nerd about it. And it is first of all extremely fascinating. And taking one little step back to what you said about that balancing that needs to be done, there is in general there is something that can be generalized and more specifically works in parallel for both the environmental performance and the financial performance on anything that is subject to electrification or sustainability in general. Whether you buy an EV, a car, or whether you buy an electric boat, in theory, you have to invest more, both financially because they cost a little bit more, and also environmentally because you have the battery packs, so you have all those rare materials, so you have the engine and tons of copper and other metals. So on a life cycle perspective, you invest into that, but then you recover those investments. You go through a break even point during the use phase compared to internal combustion, for example. And this applies to both, whether it is a boat, probably even faster on boats, given what internal combustion engine on boats
Yeah,
consume. We're talking 50, 100, 200, 500 liters per hour of usage. So perhaps on boats it is even faster than that. The thing is, there is still that it's not a misconception, but there is a communication thing that people needs to know. Yes, we might have to invest more, both environmentally and financially, into a more sustainable transportation. But then, after year two, year five, year seven, depends where you are. And how clean is the grid in terms of electric vehicles. In the case of electric vehicles, you are better for the environment. So, uh, how many times this conversation happened to you? I mean, I assume lots.
It's, I think, on a commercial boat, then the balance between capital costs and through life costs will be properly analysed, and they will often buy on commercial grounds. And the cost of running an electric boat is only around 5 to 10% of the cost of running a similar petrol or diesel boat. And the difference is shocking. And it's mainly to do with fuel cost, but it's also servicing and maintenance and everything else that's reduced on an electric boat. You also have more availability because there's less breakdowns, there's less servicing, there's less times when the vessel's taken out of service. I mean, as an example, with our first prototype electric boat, we were the first electric boat to go around the Isle of Wight in the UK. Um, nice gentle day out, doing about 55 miles, and it then cost us £20 to recharge the boat in the marina in the UK, and that would have been probably £300-400 in a similar sized petrol boat. So there's a huge difference in cost. There's also a huge difference in how people feel about that. It's not just whether they can afford it, but they're now feeling guilty going out in their petrol boat and blowing several £100s in fuel in a day, having very likely driven down to the marina in an electric car. And it's really sort of quite ironic. And the EPA in America did some studies, and their conclusion was a typical sort of 10-meter day boat could create the same amount of CO2 in one day as a diesel car would in 3 months.
Wow.
And it's, and here we are sort of banning diesel cars in many countries, um, but not doing an awful lot about, in terms of legislation, of banning petrol and diesel boats.
Mm.
Um, it's slowly happening in one or two locations, and we will definitely see more of that.
You raise a very good point because there has been in the past, actually, in the recent past, some maritime regulations that are becoming more stricter on on emissions. But at the same time, you can give the stick, but you gotta give also the carrot. Do you see governments providing enough incentives to both manufacturers as yourself to transition to electric propulsion or to develop electric propulsion, or the industry is just saying, okay, we're doing by ourselves and that's it?
Certainly in the UK, we're seeing a lot of government investment in R&D, and we've personally in our company in Optima, we've had 5 grants through Innovate UK and the Department of Transport to help with the R&D phase. But no, we're not seeing the incentives in terms of actually getting builders to change or getting customers to change. And I think it would be great, as we did with electric cars, and different countries did different schemes. Some had no VAT on
Yeah.
electric cars, some had just monetary discounts on buying an electric car, and it really helped to kickstart the industry.
Mm.
Both because it gave a bit of a financial help, it also gave messaging from government that this is the direction of travel and this is the way to go. So we'd love to see something similar for electric boats. Um, there is a price premium up front. Then there's a huge reduction in running costs, but it would be nice to see some assistance with that to make electric boats more affordable. Um, in the early days, we're going to have some sort of more wealthy adopters, early adopters, getting into the market, and that will help to get more electric boats out there. And then as the volumes increase, the costs will come down.
Mm-mm-mm.
So,
Yeah.
but it would be good to see more incentives from government for sure.
Well, that definitely helps. I mean, I've seen it firsthand with the renewables over a decade ago when I was developing renewables, and without feed-in tariffs, there wouldn't been the boom in both solar, biomasses, and other sources of green energy. Then obviously it has to be
No,
planned in a
that could never have
strategic
happened.
fashion. Yeah, never. never. Well, in Italy, in Spain, in Germany, here, in UK, it could have never, ever happened. But then, obviously, it has to be something that, together with that, you build everything at the ancient that will one day say, okay, now it can go on itself. It doesn't need that support anymore. So, as in every transition, that's why there a good government action can make it or break it very easily, very easily. Talking about other geographies, when we met, you mentioned that you are investigating other countries where to potentially set up part of the production of the Optima. And more specifically, I remember the UAE, UK, obviously, and also Italy. Uh, why this? Why, okay, UK, which is where you're based, but why also the UAE and in Italy? Specifically, why the UAE?
UAE and Middle East in general is a very interesting, young, growing market. There's some very good boat and composites manufacturing going on in the UAE.
Okay.
A lot of it, led by European company owners and managers. So a sort of big influx of European technology and skills into the UAE. There's also investment, which
Hmm.
obviously helps massively.
Yeah.
Um, and both in the UAE and the other countries on the Gulf, but also across the other side of Saudi Arabia and the Red Sea, there is going to be a massive growing market. When you look at the developments going on the Red Sea with NEOM and
Hmm.
everything else along that Saudi coastline, um, there's going to
And
be a huge demand for clean boats. They want to be clean. They will
mm,
put in all the infrastructure, and they want both clean leisure boats, but also commercial boats. There's water taxes, guest transfer boats for some of the luxury resorts and hotels,
mhm,
some of which are on offshore islands. And we can provide boats which are comfortable, are quiet, are just a much more of a pleasure to be on than a typical fast planing boat with 3 or 4 outboards on the back. Um, and that they're the sort of solutions they want. They will want to attract manufacturing to their countries, and that's part of the strategy there, which is understandable. So yeah, huge potential markets in the Middle East, which are quite technically challenging for electric boats as well, with
mhm,
temperatures. Um,
mhm,
it's where we actually have a bit of an advantage because we use a lot less energy because the boat's more efficient. So we generate less heat. So we have less cooling problems than a lot of other electric boats. You also mentioned Italy.
mhm,
Italy's huge marine manufacturing market of boats of all sorts of sizes, including a lot of work in the luxury yacht sector, um, where we could see our boats becoming luxury yacht tenders and sort of chase boats and that sort of thing. So there's a natural sort of synergy there with Italy in terms of manufacturing. The other obvious one would be Poland, which you didn't mention,
mhm,
and an awful lot of manufacturers have gone into Poland. Um, you can get some very good quality work done in Poland. You can get some very cheap and cheerful work done in Poland. So you don't need to work very closely with the right partners. Um, a lot of these countries, it built up because of cheap labour. It's not as cheap as it used to be. Their labour rates have increased, understandably, and so you have to look very carefully at the real costs. And I still believe that we could manufacture in the UK, and we
mhm,
are looking at some options in the UK. Um, we need to modernise manufacturing techniques compared to particularly how some of the big boat builders build their boats, um, both for better weight control, better quality control, and better cost control,
mhm,
and also striving for zero defects.
mhm,
The amount boat builders spend on servicing warranty claims all around the world is quite eye-watering.
Mm.
So we want to set up manufacturing in a much more modern, much cleaner um, way that also has less environmental impact and less waste.
Yeah, makes sense.
So
Especially,
all those countries are, yeah, potential manufacturing sites, and it may well be that we do end up with manufacturing in more than one country for different
yeah,
regions,
yeah.
and then ultimately across the pond in America, where again it would make sense to manufacture there.
So those number that I said it in the introductions, I didn't went too granular on that, but on the few researches I've read, 44% of the leisure boat market is the US. 44%. Which is it is absolutely incredible, it's almost half. With And then Asia, obviously with China, it is the one that is growing at the fastest pace. But and then after that you have Europe, okay. But I was impressed that that number, the 44%, just coming from the US. I didn't know that, to be honest, and growing too. Look, what I want to, so we talk about the R&D phase, we talk about the manufacturing phase. What I wanted to ask you, it is about the use phase, and this is where again, let's say private companies are taking a step forward, and I'd like to hear what you think about how governments are also acting on the shore infrastructure, which is obviously another important part to be able to decarbonize the boating industry, whether it is leisure or whether it is commercial. You're gonna still need that, with potentially larger, not potentially larger battery packs that you have in cars, that requires also fast charging, reliable in, if I can overcomplicate this, in very adverse conditions, weather conditions. You got wind, you got UV lights, you got salted water that kills everything, eats everything. So as you know very well. So what are your thoughts on this? Is it, for example, in UK, is it something that you see it is growing? Is there any other country that you see it is going faster than UK?
It's certainly growing, the implementation of charging infrastructure, and it's one of the first things that potential customers ask us about the boat. Well, that's amazing, but how do we charge it?
Mm,
A small electric boat, sort of 10, 12, 14 meters, most of the time we can charge it on conventional marina shore power. Technically, we can charge our boat on anything from trickle charging at very low currents down to sort of like 6 amps or something, up to sort of fast DC charging. The boat technically is very adaptable to knowing what it's plugged into, whether that's a 16 amp socket in a typical 10-meter berth or a three-phase 32 amp socket that will charge, AC charging will charge at 22 kilowatts. Or then the next step is dedicated DC charging, like we have for cars. We have superchargers, fast chargers, and they can charge at anywhere between sort of 75 and 350 kilowatts or more. Um, and that infrastructure is already going in. And in the UK, we have several chargers around the Solent, further down the south coast in Plymouth, and there's a program of work to sort of fill in the gaps so you could cruise along the south coast and connect to a fast DC charger.
mhm.
But for a cruise in leisure boat, most of the time we don't actually need that. We can go into any marina, any harbour, and we can plug in to some form of electricity and charge. And if it's a slightly dicey shore connection, then we can just dial the charging down so that we're not tripping it out and we're not overloading it. There is concern with the marinas that, yeah, we suddenly get 50 boats all coming home on a Sunday afternoon and all plugging in. and the
that was about
marina
to be my
won't be able to
question,
cope.
actually. Yes, what happens when you have more than enough?
It,
Yeah.
exactly. But we just need a little bit of technology not to overload the system. Those 50 electric boats will come home on a Sunday afternoon. A lot of them won't be going out the next day. They may come back the following weekend. So they need a little bit of technology, an app on their phone where they say, right, I'm going to be back next Saturday. I want my boat fully charged. And that could happen. It could happen overnight where we have excess renewable power from things like wind turbines that the grid and the networks are struggling to use. So it's often sold off very cheaply. It could be during the day when there's lots of solar power, if it's a nice sunny day, and the technology is there to use the excess power. We already have sort of home chargers for our cars, which you can set it so it will only charge when you have some spare solar energy.
Hmm.
So you're charging for free then. So we need a bit of technology to solve the answers. A lot of marinas are slightly out of town at the end of an electricity line that
Hmm.
is very difficult to upgrade. Um, so we need to sort out the peaks of demand. There is also work going on looking at boat to grid as well as car to grid
Yeah.
transfer. So you can actually use the energy stored in the boats or cars to take off the peaks of energy demand.
Yeah.
So again, if you set your app on your phone that, no, I'm not going to be using my boat this week, then they could actually use your stored energy to help with the overall demand in the marina, and you could be paid for allowing that to happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's a lot, and the other way was with battery storage on shore.
Hmm.
If we know there's going to be peak demands, and we only have a very low power shore supply, then you can charge up batteries on shore. And then when a boat comes in and it wants to pay for fast charging, you can use the energy that's stored in batteries. So there's lots of answers. But generally for
Oh
leisure
yeah,
use,
plenty. Mini wind.
we're
Marinas are
we're fine.
next to
And
shores.
yeah, and most of the time we're very happy with slow charging. We stop overnight somewhere if we're sort of cruising along the coast, or if we're in a home berth. Very often we're there for several days before we're going to use the boat again. The commercial applications are different, and they will benefit from very fast charging.
Mm.
Charging at 350 kilowatts or more. So if you run in a little water taxi or a ferry, you stop and charge every time that you're loading and unloading passengers. You do really fast charging so that you don't disrupt the service. And then as we get into bigger ships and bigger ferries and things, we can also start to look at alternative fuels, like hydrogen, like ammonia, and others. But that's probably a different topic for
Yeah.
another day.
Well, it is actually a very hot topic because if it is complex to build up the shore infrastructure with the electricity, it is even more complex for hydrogen. And
It's a lot more complicated.
it is a lot more
I
complicated. And
think
I've seen this also in
yeah,
the,
in
let's
some
say,
places
large
like
shipping industry, that they are thinking about hydrogen or other forms of e-fuels like ammonia or methanol and others. All beautiful, all fantastic, but A, they have like half the energy density of heavy fuel oil, and B, you need to build up that shore infrastructure to be able to refill the boats,
yeah,
the ships. Sorry.
and we need to
So
manufacture green fuel, green hydrogen that's
you need specialized
produced from
workforce
renewable energy.
to be able to maintain the
Yeah,
boat, to do O&M on the boat, to be able to change spare parts. So there is a whole industry that needs to be developed from basically from the ground up. Fascinating,
yeah,
like amazing, beautiful challenge, beautiful, but
yeah,
still.
it will happen. But I think
Oh yeah,
where we can make vessels work, with battery electric. One, it's so much easier because we have the infrastructure, but two, you use a lot less energy in total. You
Yeah,
waste a lot of energy in making hydrogen
yeah,
and then reconverting hydrogen back into electricity on the vessel.
yeah,
Um, so, typically you're using around 3 times the total amount of energy in running a hydrogen vessel compared to battery electric,
yeah,
whether that's a car or a boat or whatever.
yeah,
There will be cases where battery electric doesn't work, and hydrogen is a better solution. But we should really be aware of the total energy use in any solution, because we're going to have a net deficit of available energy.
yeah, yeah. That is so true. But look, we're all waiting for that breakthrough into battery technology. Solid state batteries are the usual 5 years away from commercialization since the early 2000s. But I've seen a company, is an American company. I don't remember the name right now, but they basically are packing a battery pack inside a 20-foot container that can be loaded onto small container ships or barges to be able to give that additional juice to electric propulsion into larger vessel. Okay, and they have the loading capacity to add those. Of course, it is less cargo space available, so less revenues for them. But again, we go back to that life cycle thinking approach where you don't just think about one part, but the overall. So in the usage part, it would cost much less to run that the barge or that small vessel. So it is all into that. I think all into that breakthrough. Whether it is EVs, cars, whether it is boats like Optima, the technology is there. We are at the beginning, if you think about it. What is it? Not even 10 years that we started to see more and
Yeah,
more adoption, which is nothing. It is still nothing.
we certainly are at the beginning of a journey. I don't think we're going to see a total step change in battery technology anytime soon.
Why you say that?
We will see continual
Mm,
improvements
mm,
for sure, and you can actually buy solid state batteries now. On EP Technologies in Denmark sell solid state batteries, but the difference in performance is not huge. Um, there's possibly some increased safety issues, which are better, and potentially greater life cycles and things. So vessels that are used really hard, they bring some benefits. We will also see cleaner batteries that don't contain nickel and cobalt and those sort of materials. Um, it's more those that have some environmental concerns than lithium itself.
mm-hmm,
Um, but we're definitely going to see some improvements, both in terms of life of batteries and weight and energy density, and it will all help. But the main thing is that we have vessels that work today with today's best technology,
mm-hmm,
um, and it will only get better in the future. But it certainly wouldn't put me off buying an electric boat or electric car today. The worry of a sudden step change in technology, because I think
mm.
it's still quite a long way down the road before we see massive step changes.
What do you think? Then let's look in the future. Okay, looking forward, let's say in 10 years. What do you think will define a successful yacht manufacturer or successful boat, successful yacht on the water? Should be focusing on sustainability, focusing on techs, on luxury design, or, for example, like it happened for electric cars, the connectivity thing that you basically have an iPhone, a smartphone, but with four wheels. What do you think will be the defining thing?
I think the expectations from our customers will be driven by the technology in electric cars.
Mm,
I mean, a lot of our customers will be driving high-end electric cars, and they will be used to that level of refinement of technology, of performance and everything else. So we've got to deliver the similar experience in boats. Um, our boats, of course, are zero emission, so we don't have any onboard fuels at all in terms of petrol or diesel, no generators, even the domestics, the cooking, air conditioning, everything. It's all electric. So you can use the energy store from the vessel. You can also generate electricity from solar panels on the roof and that sort of thing. Um,
Very
in
good.
terms of our success, um, in 5-10 years, we'd love to see the company building 40, 50 boats a year,
Mm,
and delivering those around the world. And I think the market is very ready for that, and I think that will then accelerate quite dramatically over the next 5 to 10 years. We need to do a lot of education to convince
mhm.
people that these boats work and that we do have the charging infrastructure, and you can actually use them as you would expect to use a petrol or diesel boat. In fact, in some ways, it's a lot easier because you just berth in your own normal berth and plug in, and next time you come back to the boat, it's full. You don't have to go and queue up and visit a fuel berth, which again on Sunday afternoon when you've been out for the weekend is is a real pain to have to go and
Yeah.
queue up behind other boats and then spend half an hour on a fuel berth filling up with diesel. We need to educate the marketplace of the benefits, and the benefits aren't only environmental. I think there will be people who buy our boats not on environmental grounds, but they buy it because it's a nicer boat. It's a
Mm,
nicer experience. You can be cruising along. You can sit on the back of the boat because you have no noise and no fumes. You wouldn't dream of using the back of the boat on many petrol and diesel boats when you're underway, because of both the noise and the fumes. Um, so it's a completely different experience, and we've got to really embrace the benefits. Um, the only real downside is that maybe we can't belt around at 30 or 40 knots. Or the electric boats that are designed to do that can do it for 10 minutes
yeah.
because it just uses too much energy. So we have to accept a world where we use less energy, and we just drop down a gear and go a little bit slower, but in a lot more comfort.
Mm.
And actually, the slower journey feels shorter. It genuinely does. And we've done this back to back where we've delivered the boat somewhere. You've done a short journey of 20 miles or something, cruising along at 10 or 12 knots, and then come back in a fast rib doing 20, 25 knots, and it genuinely felt like it was twice as far, even though it was half the time. It
Yeah.
you couldn't talk, you couldn't do anything, you just sat there thinking, how is this taking so long?
Mm.
Whereas on the way there in our electric boat, you could have a drink, you could have some lunch, you could have a conversation, you could put a bit of music on, you could do everything you could do if you were anchored in a bay. You could do that on passage, um, and the time just slips away in a very pleasant
Look,
way. Um, so
environmentally,
it's accepting these changes.
there's a lot of communication involved. Yes, I 100% agree with you. Environmentally, it is not just about those emissions from the combustion that you avoid. There is also some positive upsides for marine life in having a electrified, non-polluting and silent propulsion. Sounds propagates at least 4 times faster underwater compared to above water, and I've read tons of research on how that underwater sound pollution affects marine life, not just large mammals, but also crustaceans and everything that, the ecosystem, marine ecosystem. It is a very fine balance, has a very fine balance that needs lots of protection. And with an electric propulsion that basically do not disrupt that ecosystem. So tons of upsides, really tons of upsides. And let me repeat it one more time. At the cost of sounding like a cheerleader, it is gorgeous. That boat. It is absolutely
Thank you.
so good looking. Almost no, probably more good looking than Amal. If I can conclude our episode like this. the,
Yeah, the whole aesthetics of the boat was really important to us.
yeah.
We didn't want to produce a pure technical prototype that just proved the technology but looked ugly.
Mm,
So it was both a working prototype in terms of developing the technology, but also a demonstration boat that, an electric boat can be a beautiful thing.
yeah.
I totally agree with your points about other forms of pollution, and noise is certainly one of them, both noise to the water and to the air, and pollution into the water from petrol and diesel boats. We concentrate on CO2 emissions, understandably, but there's also a huge amount of pollution in terms of oil and petrol that leaks
Yeah.
and seeps into the water, and that is absolutely horrific.
It is.
And the pollutants from exhaust gases are emitted directly into the water. If you just run a petrol outboard in a clean tank of water, it doesn't stay clean for very long.
No,
It's really, really horrible.
I can imagine. I can imagine. I know. I mean, guilty as charged. I've been driving motorboats, but as everybody until
Yeah,
the
no,
past few years, and I really hope the adoption will speed up. That there will be much more, let's say, support at policy and government level, not just for the leisure boat, but also for commercial opportunities. There is ecotourism that it is growing, fishing that is growing, like sustainable fishing, sport fishing that is growing, and done in a, let's say, cleaner fashion. It's a win-win for everybody. And David, thank you very much for being here. It was a pleasure hearing from you. Um, all of that we've been discussing about. I really hope to see more Optima E10s, and soon was it the E14 that is coming after that?
yeah. The E14 will be an amazing boat.
Yeah,
14 meters, 46 feet, 100% electric still, and range of well over 100 miles. So you can do
fantastic.
some proper passages in that with no emissions. But no,
Yes.
thank you for the conversation, Francesco. It's lovely to talk to you as ever.
Thank you, David. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for listening to this episode of Raw Green. To get this far, you must have liked it. So don't forget to hit that like button and follow our podcast. It is a great way to support our community. At Obi, we're all about research, life cycle assessment, and green tech innovation. Stay connected with us through our social media pages or visit our website. Links are below in the description. See you next time. Ciiiao.